Hello students, we are going to solve Keith Williams payload questions in this video lecture. In the previous video lecture, we have solved the first 5 questions. In this video lecture we will solve the next 5 questions. So let's begin. Question number 6. What is the maximum allowable traffic load if performance limited takeoff mass, maximum structural takeoff mass, zero fuel mass, performance limited landing mass, maximum structural landing mass, DOM, takeoff fuel and trip fuel are given to you. So let's start with our step number 1. Now the step number 1 says to make 3 columns, one for takeoff, the second for landing, and the third one for zero fuel mass. Now in the takeoff mass column, you have to write that value which is the least of maximum structural takeoff mass or performance limited takeoff mass or ramp mass minus taxi fuel. Ramp mass minus taxi fuel. Now here they have given us two values for takeoff. Performance limited and structural limited. So out of these two values, the lesser one is 1,95,000 kg. So write 195 here. So I am going to select 195. Next, landing mass. Now landing mass is nothing but the least of similar least of maximum structural landing mass, performance limited landing mass, right? So over here there are two landing masses given, structural limited 160 and performance limited 155. So out of these two values, the 155 is the lesser one. So I'm going to select 155 and plus I'm going to add trip fuel to this in order to get your takeoff mass plus trip fuel. So 155 plus trip fuel is 36,000. So 155 plus 36, which is equal to, we will find that out. Now zero fuel mass formula is maximum zero fuel mass plus fuel on board or takeoff fuel. So which is equal to zero fuel mass is 122. Takeoff fuel or fuel on board is 40,000 or 40. So 155 plus 36 is 191. 122 plus 40 is 162. So the least value is 162. 162. So your regulated takeoff mass is going to be 162 or 1,62,000 kg. Step number 2, use the direct formula. Takeoff mass equals to dry operating mass plus payload plus fuel on board. So takeoff mass is 162, dry operating mass is 65. To calculate payload, fuel on board is 40,000 kg. Fuel on board is nothing but takeoff fuel. So 40,000. So I am writing here 40. Therefore, payload equals to 162 minus 65 plus 40. 162 minus 65 plus 40 is 105. 162 minus 105 is 57. So your payload is 57,000 kgs. 57,000 kg. Okay. So correct answer is option A. Option A. So let's go to question 7. What is the maximum allowable traffic load if performance limited takeoff mass, maximum structural takeoff mass, zero fuel mass, performance limited landing mass, maximum structural landing mass, DOM, takeoff fuel, refuel are given to you. So to solve this question, you have to make three columns. Step 1, to make three columns, one for takeoff mass, one for landing mass, and the last one for zero fuel mass. I'm going to write the list of performance limited takeoff mass, maximum structural takeoff mass, list of performance limited takeoff mass or maximum structural takeoff mass. So the least is, so performance limited is 195, maximum structural limited is 175. So you are going to write the value of 175. In case of landing mass, you have to choose the value which is least of performance limited landing mass, maximum structural landing mass, and you are going to add trip fuel to that. Okay. So least of performance limited or maximum structural limited is, so performance limited landing mass is 155, structural limited landing mass is 150. So the lesser value is 150 plus trip fuel which is 46,000 or 46. Zero fuel mass, you have to write the formula maximum zero fuel mass plus fuel on board or takeoff fuel. So maximum zero fuel mass is 122 plus fuel on board. Fuel on board is what? Takeoff fuel. So which is 60,000. So you can consider 60. So the final value is 150 plus 46, 906. Zero fuel mass 122 plus 60, 182. Now we have three takeoff values, 175, 196, 182. So out of these three takeoff values, the least is 175. Okay, so this is going to be your regulated takeoff mass 175 or 1,75,000 kg. Step number 2, use direct formula. Takeoff mass is equal to dry operating mass plus fuel on board plus payload. So takeoff mass is 175. Dry operating mass is 1 lakh. So you write 100. Fuel on board is 60. 60,000. So write 60. And payload we have to calculate. Therefore, payload equals to 175 minus 160. Therefore, payload equals to 15 or 15,000 kg. 15 or 15,000 kg. So option A is the correct option. 15,000 kg. Let's go to question number 8. What is the maximum allowable traffic load if performance limited takeoff mass is 1,95,000 kg? Maximum structural takeoff mass is 1,83,000. Similarly, they have given two landing mass values, performance limited, structural limited, a zero fuel mass value, DOM is given, takeoff fuel is given, trip fuel is given. So similar sums, similar steps. So step 1, make three columns, one for takeoff mass, the second one for landing mass, the third one for zero fuel mass. So in the takeoff mass, you are going to write a value which is the least of performance limited takeoff mass and maximum structural takeoff mass. So the least is 195 and 183. So the lesser value is 183. In case of landing mass column, you have to select the value which is least of or lesser value between performance limited landing mass, maximum structural landing mass, and then to that we have to add trip fuel. So the least or the lesser value between them is 155, 150. So the lesser value is 150, the maximum structural landing mass value. So 150 plus trip fuel. What is your trip fuel? It is 46,000. So add 46. Zero fuel mass column. So maximum zero fuel mass plus fuel on board or takeoff fuel. So maximum zero fuel mass is 1,22,000, also known as, or we can consider 122. Fuel on board. Fuel on board is nothing but your takeoff fuel. So takeoff fuel is 60,000. So consider 60. So 122 plus 60 is 182. 150 plus 46 is 196. 183 is one value. 196 is another. And 182 is the third one. So out of these three possible takeoff values, we have to select that value which is the least. And over here the value which is least in number is 182. So our regulated takeoff mass is 182 or 1,82,000. Remember that. Next, step 2 is direct formula. Takeoff mass is equal to dry operating mass plus payload plus fuel on board or takeoff fuel. So takeoff mass is 182. Dry operating mass is 1 lakh kg. So 100. Payload is you have to calculate, and takeoff fuel or fuel on board is 60,000. So use 60. So plus payload plus 60. So payload will be equal to 182 minus 160. So payload will be 22 kg, meaning 22,000 kg. So the correct answer is Bravo, 22,000 kg. Next, question number 9. What is the maximum allowable traffic load if performance limited takeoff mass, maximum structural takeoff mass, zero fuel mass, performance landing mass, maximum structural landing mass, DOM, takeoff fuel, trip fuel are given? Similar question. So same step. Step number 1, make 3 columns, one for takeoff mass, landing mass, zero fuel mass. So in the takeoff mass column, you are going to write a value which is the least of performance limited takeoff mass, maximum structural takeoff mass, or ramp mass minus taxi fuel. So in this case, you will get performance limited takeoff mass is 215, maximum structural takeoff mass is 195. So the lesser value between them is 195. So you'll select that. So 195 here. Now in the landing mass column, you have to select a value which is the least of performance limited landing mass, maximum structural landing mass, and then to that you have to add trip fuel. Now the value which is less between the lesser value between performance limited landing mass and maximum structural landing mass is, now the performance limited landing mass is 145 and the structural limited landing mass is 1,50,000. Okay, ignore this. So the lesser value is 145. So 145 plus trip fuel. So trip fuel is 46,000 or 46. So plus 46. Next, zero fuel mass column. In this column, the formula is maximum zero fuel mass plus takeoff fuel or fuel on board. So maximum zero fuel mass is 1,40,000 or 140. Takeoff fuel or fuel on board is 60,000. So 60. 140 plus 60 is 200. 145 plus 46 is 191. Now we have three possible takeoff values: 195, 191 and 200. So out of these three values, the least value is 191. So your regulated takeoff mass is going to be 191 or 1,91,000 kg. Okay, so now next step number 2, use direct formula. Takeoff mass equals to dry operating mass plus payload plus fuel on board, also known as takeoff fuel. Substitute the values. Takeoff mass is 191, dry operating mass is 100, payload we do not know, fuel on board or takeoff fuel is 60,000 or 60. Therefore, payload will be equal to 191 minus 160. So payload will be equal to 31 or 31,000 kg. So the correct option is option delta, 31,000 kg. Next, question number 10. What is the maximum allowable traffic load if performance limited takeoff mass and maximum structural takeoff mass given to you? Similarly, performance limited landing mass, maximum structural landing masses are given to you. Zero fuel mass is there, DOM is there, takeoff fuel or fuel on board is there, trip fuel is there as well. So start with your step number 1. Draw three columns, one for takeoff mass, the second one for landing mass, the third one for zero fuel mass. Now in the takeoff mass, like I always say, you're going to choose a value which is least of performance limited takeoff mass, maximum structural takeoff mass or ramp mass minus taxi fuel. So now we have two values in front of us, 1,75,000 and performance limited takeoff mass 1,65,000. So the value which is lesser is 1,65,000. So we select that and write it here 165. In the landing mass column, you have to select a value which is lesser in number between performance limited landing mass and maximum structural landing mass, and to that you add trip fuel. So now here performance landing mass is 145, maximum structural landing mass is 150. So the value which is lesser in number between them is 145. So use that 145 plus trip fuel. Now trip fuel is 33,000, so use 33. Zero fuel mass. The formula will be maximum zero fuel mass plus fuel on board. So that will be equal to maximum zero fuel mass 122. Fuel on board will be equal to 40,000 of 40. That will be equal to 162. And landing mass 87178. So we have three possible takeoff values: 165, 178 and 162. Select that value which is the least among them, and that value is 162 or 1,62,000 kg. Okay. Step number 2, use the direct formula. Takeoff mass is equal to payload plus DOM plus fuel on board or takeoff fuel. So takeoff mass is 162, payload calculate, DOM is 100 and fuel on board is 40. Therefore payload will be equal to 162 minus 140. Payload will be equal to 22 or 22,000 kg. Okay. So the correct answer here will be Bravo, 22,000 kg. So this is how you do these 10 sums. I hope you have understood all the questions that I have solved in this video lecture. If you have any doubt, any questions, let me know in the comment box. I thank you for your time. I request you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't done it, and share this video with all your friends. See you in the next video lecture.